Welcome to the season premiere of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy on Pub Sports Radio. Great to be back for another football season. And last year, we did this show at this time, Thursdays, 1 p.m. Eastern time. It was mostly NFL. But we're going to have a lot of other NFL college football shows on Pub Sports Radio's YouTube channel throughout the season. So we are going to basically make this a CFL show this season, Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy, because we don't really have any CFL on this channel outside of this. So we're going to be basically using this as a CFL show, breaking down the CFL games each and every week from a betting perspective. And very excited on this premiere edition, on this opening day of the CFL season, opening kickoff. We get a Grey Cup rematch from 2 years ago, Hamilton against Winnipeg to get things going. Very happy to have a former CFL Grey Cup champion, all-star wide receiver in his playing days with Saskatchewan, with Edmonton, Chris Getzlaf, joining me as a special guest on the premiere edition. Chris, it's great to have you, and I'm sure you're like me and a lot of us excited for another CFL season.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me. We've gone so long now, it seems, without watching some CFL football. So very excited for the kickoff of the season and really getting into it and see some competition out on the field again.
Yeah, no doubt. It's going to be a very unique season because, look, this is 2 years now for a lot of these guys without playing. And I think you can speak to that, Chris, as a player. It would be a tough adjustment, right? Going this long without playing competitive football in a game situation. And to exacerbate the matters even more, there's no preseason this year going into this season. So you're basically going off what you've seen in practice and what you've seen in, say, a training camp scrimmage. And I've got something that was very telling that came out of the Saskatchewan, training camp scrimmage. We'll get to that in a little bit when we talk Saskatchewan, but that's basically what head coaches and offensive coordinators and defensive coordinators, Chris, that's essentially all they have to go off right now is training camp performance, maybe in the team scrimmages. The fact that these teams don't get that opportunity to evaluate talent in preseason game action, it makes this a totally different and unique start to a CFL season, unlike anything we've seen before, right?
Yeah, it's got to be really tough. When you're trying to put together a team, those preseason games, especially when you're talking young rookie players or free agent pickups, you need to see them when the lights are on and to get true evaluation. Someone can be lights out in practice, but when it comes to playing under the lights, they're just not the same, or vice versa. I mean, you could see someone who looks average in practice, is picking up a little bit, but when you get to game action, all of a sudden, they're an all-star. So it makes it really hard, I think, on GMs and coaches in developing and figuring out who to retain on their team. When it comes to veteran players, that kind of time off is definitely not ideal, but they've actually played in the league and they've played in games. So they know, coaches, GMs know what they can expect from players who have been in the league for a bit. So I think the biggest challenge for them is who to keep as rookies when you don't get to see them actually playing game on the game film.
Yeah, absolutely. Very good points, indeed. Now, quick and concise are not always my most positive attributes. Usually I'm rambling and I'm long-winded, and I try to give as much info and detail and analysis as possible on any show I'm doing on this channel. But we're going to try to be a little bit quick in terms of quick hitters. Just before we get into the specific 4 games in week 1, just briefly on the 9 teams in the league. We'll start in the West Division, BC, Saskatchewan, Edmonton, Calgary, Winnipeg. When I come into this season, I look at it as BC, I think, still has a ways to go, Chris, in terms of getting this team back to where they need to be. It was a disaster 2 years ago. I feel bad for Devon Claybrooks. I think it was just a tough situation for him at first year as head coach and then let go after that. But they bring in Rick Campbell, who's been a defensive coordinator in the league for a long time. And, of course, Ottawa Red Blacks head coach, Grey Cup champ there. I think a stable hire. I think he'll turn this team around eventually. I just don't know if it's going to happen right away. A lot of people still see Mike Riley. Apparently, they're calling him Michael Riley now because I'm seeing it on all the marquees that it's Michael Riley now. You wouldn't have pulled that stunt, Chris, when you were playing, right? I'm not Chris Getzlaf anymore. Call me Christopher Getzlaf, right? You wouldn't have done that.
I think that he has good reasons to do it, and it's honoring his mom. So definitely not against it. I think it'll be tougher on everyone around him that's used to calling him Mike all the time to make that adjustment.
Yeah, absolutely. So I like Mike Riley. Michael Riley. He's had a great career. Don't get me wrong, but the offensive line was awful for him. He had, I think, his most interceptions in a season 2 years ago. I don't know if they've solidified that O line a lot. I like the pieces they have on defense. They brought in Shaq Cooper at running back. Brian Burnham has clearly established himself as an elite receiver. If you can find him the ball, that's going to be significant. But there's a lot of questions I have with BC. I'm going to need to see improvement. I think they could start slow, but because they got a good coach, they could get better. The second half of the season, from a betting standpoint, I don't want to back BC early on. I want to see what they're doing first. I want to see if there's improvement, both sides of the ball. I want to see if that O line is shored up big time. That would be my concern. So I think BC is a team I'm probably going to bet against early, but if they show improvement, maybe look to back them later in the season. Calgary, I don't know if I've seen a Calgary team, Chris, with as much question marks coming into a season. The wide receiving core, Eric Rogers, Juwan Brescison, two tremendous Canadian receivers gone. Now with the Toronto Argonauts, they've got to refill and replenish the wide receiving core a bit. The O-line's had some turnover and personnel departure following 2 years ago. On the defensive side of the football, the D-line and secondary, there's some roster shuffling as well. So, and the one constant, though, and the one thing you say, Calgary's got all these question marks. Can they still be really good? Bo Levi Mitchell's record is something like 77-18, as a starting quarterback in the CFL. It's incredible. So if there's one quarterback that can deal with all this, it's him. And that's why I think Calgary can still be a pretty good football team this year, as long as he stays healthy. I know they got question marks. Who would back him up? What happens if he's hurt? He had a groin issue in training camp, but he says he's fine and he's ready to go for week 1. So I still think Calgary have a pretty good season. I'm going to now go to Edmonton. This is the team I'm really looking to back, and I'm really high on the Edmonton Elks this season going into 2021. Their offense is loaded with Trevor Harris, with Greg Ellingson, with Armonte Edwards, Darrell Walker, a terrific offensive skill position group. Running back James Wilder Jr., who I think is motivated now coming into this year. I like the hire of Elizondo. And normally in a year like this, the new head coach, he's behind, right? You got to implement new systems, new schemes on both sides of the ball. There's a learning curve. But Elizondo had Harrison Ellingson with him in Ottawa when he was the offensive coordinator there. I think that really dramatically lessens the learning curve that Edmonton's got to go through with this new head coach. And Noel Thorpe is the DC. He's been around for a very long time. I think that was a good hire from Montreal and Ottawa. He's been a defensive coordinator a very long time. Defense was their issue 2 years ago, but they really solidified. I think the D-line will be better. Watch out for Kwaku Boateng. That guy's going to disrupt opposing quarterbacks big time this year. He's got great talent and ability. And the secondary, I think, is shored up a bit. That was their big problem 2 years ago in the final year of Jason Moss's tenure there. So Edmonton's that team. You play a little defense with that offense ability to score, I think, 30-plus points weekly. They can be a really good team. They're my dark horse in the West Division, the Edmonton Elks. Saskatchewan. No, you know this team very well, Chris. Everybody's singing the praises of Cody Fajardo. I get it. Unbelievable season last year, breakout year. I know the O-line has got some, it's worrying me. I don't know. It's probably worrying Craig Dickinson as well. That O-line was just obliterated in the training camp scrimmage by the defense, which I think is going to be the strength of the Rough Riders. It's that defense. And Ed Gainey and Nick Marshall in the secondary is as good as it gets. But I think that offense is really worrisome. I'm looking at them game to game as an under team this season. Saskatchewan, they'll play a lot of low-scoring games, I think, because I think the defense could be ahead of the offense. It could be that way across the board, but I think for Saskatchewan, definitely, there's concerns with that offensive line coming into this season that would worry me, and I think their defense will be ahead of things, and that's why I'm a little bit concerned about Saskatchewan. The people think they can win the West. If the offense shows me that they can overcome these O-line issues, they certainly are capable of that, but they're going to have to show me that first. And then there's Winnipeg, who start the season tonight against my Ticats. Still could be very good, but I think the loss of Paul LaPolice as offensive coordinator is going to matter. And not that Buck Pierce can't do the job, but that offense was terrific when Paul LaPolice was calling the plays there. You look at tonight, they're without Andrew Harris and Darvin Adams, two weapons. I liked, obviously, Willie Jefferson, Jackson. Their defensive line is outstanding, Winnipeg. But the secondary, they lost a ton. They lost a lot of really good players in that pass and Adam Bighill's a good linebacker, but that pass defense definitely concerns me. for the Bombers. Jonathan Rose is no longer there. They lost a couple of other key contributors, too, on that secondary. And one starter that was remaining from 2 years ago isn't playing tonight. So I'm a little bit worried about that pass defense. When I look at the West, Saskatchewan, a little concerned. Edmonton's the team I'm looking to back. Chris, what are your just overall thoughts, West Division, the 5 teams there?
Well, I think the West is pretty loaded for the most part. I agree with what you're saying with BC. I think they probably end up at the bottom of the West. Calgary is just a team that it seems like year over year, everyone always is talking about them. This year they start to slip. This year they start to slip. And, they went a little backwards last year, but the organization from top to bottom just seems to produce winners constantly. So, to rule them out, I think is a mistake. I don't think that they're going to win the West by any stretch, but I think they're going to be a fairly good football team. The Elks, I agree with you. I think that they're going to be good. They're pretty loaded from top to bottom. To me, it's going to be whether that somewhat revamped defense is able to really hold it together, because they're probably going to have some high scoring games. Saskatchewan, I agree with almost everything you said. I do think that they're actually loaded on offense, other than, yes, the O-line is somewhat in question with, retirements or people sitting out, or just the situation that they've ended up in. I think their depth is weak at O-line right now. So if they can come together, though, if the O-line can click, they're going to be a good football team, because I think the defense is good, and I think their offensive skill positions is very good. Winnipeg, losing LaPolice is, I think, a big deal for the offense. Buck Pierce has been an understudy for a while now, though, so I think he's got a really good handle on that, and he'll probably take it in stride. Whether they can overcome the departures is, I think, the biggest question. And really, they really came into their own at the end of the season, when it really mattered last season that they got to play, and were able to win the Grey Cup. So I don't think that they're going to be that dominant of a team this year, but they should be a good football team still. So the West is going to be completely up for grabs.
It's always competitive, right? And it's always been the superior division, top to bottom, in the CFL. I feel embarrassed at times for the East. We've had miserable years from Ottawa, miserable years from Toronto. Montreal was a dumpster fire for years, bringing in these head coaches that had no business, being in the CFL, because they didn't have a clue how the Canadian game worked. Mike Sherman and Dan Hawkins was a travesty how bad he was. For the Montreal Alouettes, bad as it gets from a coaching standpoint. But now they got Kahari. We'll get to Montreal's when we talk about the East. But now I think Kahari Jones, from a respect standpoint, you can't tell me these players don't respect him a whole hell of a lot more than Mike Sherman and Dan Hawkins. Players don't give two shits what you did in the NFL and college football. Do you know the CFL game? Do you know the Canadian game? And can you earn the respect of that locker room? And Kahari Jones has done that for Montreal way more than the previous head coaches they've had. As far as the East is going to go, Chris Getzlaf, I'm telling you right now, Chris, that I'm not going to say this because I'm a homer, but obviously if we don't win the East, there's something wrong. Our team from an offensive standpoint, defensive standpoint, is very, very strong, both sides of the ball. We've got depth at a lot of positions as well, which is always important. Because I find CFL, the one thing you get every year is injuries. And it's very important to have that. And there's no team that has the situation Hamilton has, where you could put in QB2 and get the same kind of confidence and ability to get the job done as QB1. And you have that now, where even if Jeremiah Masoli, who's named the starting quarterback, falters or gets hurt, you've got Dane Evans, the product out of Tulsa, who, I remember betting Tulsa a lot when Dane Evans was the quarterback there in his college days, and he was an outstanding quarterback there, threw the football, good arm, good awareness in the pocket, and he was great taking over from Masoli 2 years ago. So Hamilton's going to be extremely good. Just by default, they should win the division, because when it comes to Montreal, I think they're on the right path. I think they're Hamilton's biggest threat in the division. If I had to pick one team, it would be Montreal. I like Vernon Adams Jr. I like Eugene Lewis, BJ Cunningham. The receiving course good. William Standback, basically established himself as one of the better running backs in the league. The defense, some change there, but I think they'll be improved this year. And Kahari Jones is just night and day the difference with a good head coach there. So Montreal should have a pretty solid season. I think they're second in the East. Toronto and Ottawa, that's where who's going to be last. I think Toronto's got a lot of talent, Chris, but I think it's just going to take time with Ryan Dinwiddie, first time ever head coach, new systems, new coordinators, just a complete roster turnover from last year. They have talent, though. They got Hughes. They have Cordero Law on defense, Cleon Lang. I mean, they've got some good talent on I think he went to Ottawa, though. They bring in Sean Lemon. So there is definitely some good signs for the Toronto Argonauts. On offense, Nick Arbuckle, what's he going to do? He's a first time ever starting quarterback for the in the CFL for the Toronto Argonauts. He got some starts in Calgary when Bo Levi Mitchell was hurt. But I mean, as the number one guy, we haven't seen Nick Arbuckle in that position. So how is that going to go for him this year in Toronto? Toronto's one of those teams because of the talent that Pinball Clemens, give him credit. Pinball Clemens has, I think, brought more talent to the Argos just in this one-off season than anybody did. Jim Pop, other guys they've had as GM in previous years. So I think the talent's there, but it's going to take time with the new coaching staff and all the new faces. So they're one of those teams kind of like BC in the West where they struggle early, I think, but back half of the season, second half of the year, I could see them covering point spreads. I could see them being competitive and winning games and maybe beating some teams that you don't expect them to. So that's where I see the Argos. And for Ottawa, with Paul LaPolice there, I like doing I don't know if you're a rap and hip hop guy, Chris, but every time I bring up Paul LaPolice, I got to do it. The KRS-One reference. Whoop, whoop. That's the sound of LaPolice. Paul LaPolice for the Ottawa Red Blacks. Great hire. But boy, an offense that averaged 17 points per game 2 years ago, a horrendous defense. Matt Nichols was nice to bring in a veteran quarterback like that, but can he stay healthy? He's already banged up going into week 1 against Edmonton. That's a concern. So for Ottawa, I think it's going to be a long road ahead for them. LaPolice long term will, I think, get this organization pointed in the right direction, but it's going to take time. Chris, what are your thoughts on the East Division? I hate to say it, it feels like it's the least division when you compare it to the West.
Yeah, I would agree with that statement, but I think you nailed it with Hamilton. I think they run away with the division. They're one of the best teams in the league. I think that they go to the Grey Cup and lose to the West again, but they're a phenomenal football team. So they're running away with the East. When it comes to second in the East, I might lean towards Montreal, but I don't know. I kind of feel like Toronto has brought in the talent that they could overcome that. It's just one of those ones where it's like you said, they're probably going to start slow. There's way too many new bodies, new systems. They got to develop that chemistry and really bring the team together in order to start putting wins together. But the talent that was brought in the offseason and the depth that they have now, I think is pretty extreme for the league. So, if they can get good quarterback play, which that'll be a question mark, they could definitely be a team that outperforms what a lot of people would expect. Ottawa, I see them being last in the division. I like Lapo. I think that he's got great systems, good play caller, good coach, period. But I just don't know if he has the talent around the team in order to put together a lot of wins this year. And then Montreal, I think Montreal is still going to continue to move forward. I agree with everything you said about Kahari. Phenomenal person, phenomenal coach, and he gets the respect out of everybody in that locker room, and everyone wants to play hard for him. So I think they'll continue to move forward from where they left off. Hamilton by far number 1, number 2 in the East, I think, is up for grabs between Montreal and Toronto, and then I think Ottawa is kind of alone at the bottom.
Yeah, I think your point about Toronto talent-wise, I think if you look at the rosters and you really measure them up with Hamilton number 1, of course, in terms of roster, but Toronto with Montreal and Ottawa particularly, you could make a case Toronto's more talented the roster top to bottom than Montreal and Ottawa, especially on defense. I can't believe they got Henoch Muamba as well, and they are loaded with quality Canadian depth, Chris. And you know how important that is because of the ratio, because you have to start a certain number of Canadians every single game in the CFL. To be able to have depth of Canadian talent, that is important. And Pinball Clemens, again, did a great job of that. for the Argos. So that's significant for them. It's just a question of how quickly they gel, how quickly the cohesion comes together. And it could be a question of that because it could take a few weeks, could take a month. But boy, there could be a point in this season, Chris, where that Argos team could, and I hate saying that. I hate the team. I hate their guts as a Ticats fan. But, there could be a time when they win 6 of 7, go on like a 5-2, 6-1 kind of. They could do that in the second half when things start to mesh a little bit. So keep an eye on that Argos team for sure. All right, now the fun part. We're going to go game by game through the 4 games here in week 1. We'll start with the opener tonight. Hamilton, Winnipeg. The current line has Hamilton 2.5 point road favorites. 49.5 is the total in this game. It opened 3.5, 4. So money's come in on Winnipeg. Money's come in on the under because the total opened in the 51 range and it's down to 49.5. There's going to be, I think, a league-wide reaction, Chris, to week 1, first game in 2 years, defenses ahead of the offenses. That could very well be true. And I think there's some sentiment there when you look at it. I know Brandon Banks kind of alluded to the fact that he thinks the offense for his team could be off to a rough start. More than anything, Chris, it's the injuries across the league going into week 1. Like, these injury reports are insane. You're talking about not just players out, key players on both teams in this game tonight. There's no Darvin Adams, arguably the best receiver for the Bombers. There's no Andrew Harris. Brady Oliveira is going to be the running back taking his spot tonight for the Bombers. You look at Hamilton, there's no Ted Laurent, one of my favorite, more underrated Canadian players in the league. He's been great for us. That interior of the D-line is always strong with him there. He's not playing tonight. They acquired Don Jackson, running back from Calgary in the offseason. He's out. Chris Van Zyl, a very good Canadian O-lineman for years, terrific season 2 years ago. He's not going to play. Braylon Addison, Devere Posey, 2 of our receivers that are projected to be starters this year are out. So it's going to be a lot to fall on the shoulders of Brandon Banks this year, voted the number 1 player in the CFL going into this season by TSN on the show they did earlier this week. So there's just so many personnel issues, both sides of the ball. To me, Chris, this is a tough game. This is one of those games from a betting standpoint where I'd say take it easy, keep it minimal, keep it a smaller bet if you want to get involved with it. I do lean to Hamilton because of the revenge factor, but I was not expecting them to be opening as more than a field goal favorite on the road in Winnipeg, where they're going to have a full house, fully vaccinated fans, full capacity. It's still tough home field for the road team to play in Winnipeg. I think Saskatchewan number 1, hands down, but I think Hamilton and Winnipeg, they're right there as number 2 in terms of strongest home field advantage in the CFL. So it's not going to be an easy environment for Winnipeg. I'm going to cheer like hell for the Ticats. I know they want this one badly because Winnipeg beat them in the Grey Cup 2 years ago. I'll lean to them slightly, and I'll lean a little bit with the total dropping to the over because I still think there's enough quarterback play from Kolaros Masoli, enough weapons to work with at receiver for these teams. They could do damage. And another thing that has me leaning over, even though I don't love it, is the secondaries, Chris. Winnipeg's completely rebuilt in the secondary, and Hamilton's got a couple of key cogs out in their secondary as well tonight. Tindele for the Ticats, who was tremendous for us 2 years ago. He's not going to play. So when you have pass defenses, Chris, that are maybe shorthanded and suffering cluster injuries, that's when miscommunication happens, right? Blown assignments, blown coverages, receivers get wide open. I do worry we might see something like that on both sides tonight because the secondary for both the Ticats and the Bombers does have some personnel issues going into the game. So for that reason, with the total now 49.5, I'll lean over, but I don't feel strongly side or total about this game. Chris, what's your thoughts here? Season opener tonight, Cats and Bombers.
I think I like the Ticats. I think it should be a tight game. I do like the over actually. For a couple different reasons. The secondaries is a huge question mark, like you were talking about, with a lot of change. The other thing is that a lot of guys haven't been tackling for a long time. So I think we're going to see a lot more missed tackles early on in this season than you will see later on in the season. And that's just due to practice. There hasn't been actual tackling going on for an extended period of time when you're talking a year and a half. So a real game is always a lot different than actual practice because actual practice is very, very limited when it comes to tackling all the way to the ground. So I think that's going to be a factor. Uh, I like Mazzoli coming back and getting back into the mix and their offense putting up some pretty good numbers. And Caleros to me he's still kind of a question mark. I know that he obviously proved at the end of the last season when winning the Grey Cup and everything, but their defense was playing outstanding for those games. And he was obviously clicking and did his job, and they put up the wins, and he's Grey Cup champion. But I'm not sure that he's. I wouldn't call him the same caliber as Mazzoli. So that's why I'm leaning Hamilton with it, and I would slightly like the over.
Yeah, Collaros has had a nice career, but it's obviously been marred by injuries. And last year, Saskatchewan, he was up and down, I guess you could say, when he was the quarterback there. And then he got to Winnipeg and things just clicked. He got red hot. The whole team essentially caught fire, right? Because that was a team that was up and down 2 years ago. And then they caught fire late in the regular season, playoffs, made the run with Collaros there. And they played their best football at the right time on the route to winning the Grey Cup. Now you got to show you can do it the full season. And that's a good point about tackling being an issue tonight. 2 years, and there could be sloppy tackling, missed tackles in the open field, which leads to yards after the catch. You could see a lot of explosive plays because of that. And that's always that, back and forth that people have. Because I talk to people, they say, oh, 2 years with no football, the offenses are going to be feeling it more because, receivers will break off routes too early. Miscommunication with the quarterback. Quarterback expected an up and out, and you just stopped and made it an intermediate, and all of a sudden there's an incomplete pass because communication was messed up. And then there's people that kind of think like you and I do here a little bit coming into tonight that maybe the defenses are impacted more. Tackling is sloppy. You're not able to wrap up as easily in the open field, and that could take time to get better. So there's always, opposite viewpoints, I guess you could say, to looking at the layoff. But I'm kind of with you. I think the tackling could be a little bit suspect going into this season and into these week 1 games. So it's a fascinating dynamic to look at. The other 3 games, we'll go to BC Saskatchewan next. There's no numbers posted yet at any sports books for these last 3 games. So there's no side, no total. And look, I think they're a little bit scared and trepidatious. Odds makers to post numbers. This is a unique start to a season. No preseason, no games in 2 years, and a ton of injuries across the board. We didn't even get Hamilton, Winnipeg posted till yesterday. We see nothing yet for BC Saskatchewan. So we'll just go verbatim here with no numbers to go off. But I think Saskatchewan at home, they'll win the game. I don't know. They'll be favored. I think they'll be favored. My numbers would have them around 7, point home favorites in this game. I don't know if I'd want to lay the 7 with their O-line concerns that I expressed earlier, but I do think they would win that game. And the under is the way I would go in this game because I do think the defense for Saskatchewan is elite. And I think the offense could take some time, that O-line to gel with all the changes. I mean, Brendan Labatt, we know how good he was for so many years there in Saskatchewan. So gone, and there's going to be an adjustment now without him and a lot of new pieces. You're right about the skill position talent. There's weapons for Saskatchewan and Cody Fajardo. But again, if your O-line doesn't have that continuity and cohesion, it could be a struggle. And I don't see BC's still, makeshift O-line that they're trying to improve from 2 years ago going into Saskatchewan and hanging 28, 30 points. I just don't see it against this defense on the road. No, I just don't see that happening. So I'm looking to go under the total in this game, Lions and Rough Riders more than anything else. Chris, your thoughts, BC, Saskatchewan?
I like Saskatchewan for sure. I think that they win handily. Their defense, I think, is going to be dominant, and a sellout crowd in Saskatchewan. I mean, it's going to be tough. It's already tough enough that offense hasn't had the continuity for a year and a half of actual playing in game. And when you get out in the field where you can't communicate at all because it's too loud, it's just going to be way too hard on you. So. The Saskatchewan's defense dominates the game, and I think that I think I like the under as well. Chances are BC's strength for at least this game might be their defense. Rick Campbell's got a defensive mindset. I think that that could be the strength of their team, at least for the start of the season, even though I am a big fan of Michael Riley. But I don't know how Saskatchewan's offense is really going to come out. I think there is some concern there on the O-line, like you were mentioning before. the weapons, though, I mean, they could put together some points. I think what will really dictate the over-under in this one is how many turnovers there are, because that could lead to short fields, win more points. And I think that Saskatchewan's going to end up getting a few turnovers in this game. So I still think that I would lean the under, assuming it's probably going to be around a 51.
Yeah, I would think it's probably going to be this one could be, high 40s as well, 50, could be a little lower than say the total for the Hamilton Winnipeg game, but I would still be looking probably under that number because I do think it'll be a little bit harder for both teams offensively to get clicking here. And by the way, it's a Friday night game in Saskatchewan. You got to believe it's going to be a raucous atmosphere, especially with it being a Friday night start of the weekend. The watermelon heads will be out in full force there, no question about that. I mean, it's always fun to watch a game in Saskatchewan. I want to get there for a game at some point. One of these years when Hamilton plays in Saskatchewan, I got to get there for a game because I've been to Toronto, I've been to Ottawa, Montreal, and of course I haven't been out west for a BC. I almost did because I was in Vancouver 2 years ago, but the timing just wasn't right to go to a Lions game. But got to go to some of those Western stadiums in the next few years once we get back to more and more travel following this pandemic, which thankfully it looks like is starting to be in the rearview mirror. We're starting to get past this finally. Toronto and Calgary, we got two games on Saturday. The Argos, we talked about them and all the changes, the new coaching staff, all the talent is definitely there. But now you got to ask this team to go into Calgary first week of the season. Calgary's definitely got some changes as well, offensively and defensively. They're going to have to rely more on, with all the guys they lost in terms of both sides of the ball. On defense, it's going to be more along, Corey Greenwood, I thought played great 2 years ago at linebacker. Jamar Wall, I think, established himself as an elite cornerback in the secondary. So those are the guys that'll be leading it for Calgary. The D-line, again, has had some changes. The O-line as well. The receiving core, definitely different from last year. I mean, a couple of those key guys gone to the team they're playing, the Toronto Argonauts, namely Rogers and Brescison. So it's just going to be a matter of, can Calgary plug the holes? I think they do. The one thing John Huffnagel has done, as GM there, and it's continued even after he stepped down as head coach and gave it to Dave Dickinson, they definitely bring in a lot of depth, a lot of quality talent. Calgary's always done that. So I think they'll be able to reload, if you will, Chris, not rebuild. I think that's kind of what you look at for Calgary. I think they can win this game. I'll be interested in probably betting the Stamps if I can get a -7 or less. I don't know if I will. But I think it'll be a tough ask for Toronto in their first game with all the new faces, the new coaching staff. And look, there's no guarantee Nick Arbuckle makes his first start for the Argos here on Saturday. He's limited in practice this week, and you might have to see McLeod Bethel Thompson or Antonio Pipkin as the starting quarterback for Toronto on Saturday night. And Pipkin was mediocre in Montreal. Look, McLeod Bethel Thompson is what he is. He's a journeyman quarterback. This is a guy that was cut from a bunch of NFL teams years ago in preseason. I remember him. And he's struggling in NFL preseasons, got cut, came to CFL. Actually, he's had some good games here in the CFL, but he's actually had a lot of inconsistency. That's been his issue. I don't know if I'd want Bethel Thompson in there on the road against Calgary in week 1 if Nick Arbuckle can't go. So this is a game where I'd lean probably Calgary to win and cover and lean under the total. This is another one where I think it could be low scoring because I do think Toronto's strength talent-wise is on defense. They loaded up the defense. And regardless of whether it's Arbuckle or one of the two backups, I don't know if I love the quarterback situation for immediate success to hit the ground running, to have this offense in peak form in the very first game of the season on the road. So I could see this game ending up a lower scoring game as well. Chris, what are your thoughts on Argos and the Stamps?
I like the Stamps handily again, for a lot of the reasons that you mentioned. And it's, you touched on Huff and what he's done there. I mean, it just seems like every time a brand new receiver ends up getting into the lineup, they're unreal. So they just constantly turn over great talent, and they constantly just fill holes that get emptied, and they just move on and they just keep winning. And with Bo Levi Mitchell throwing the football, I think their offense is going to be clicking early. And I mean, Dave Dickinson's a phenomenal play caller, and that's going to continue. So I like them to win handily. Calgary is somewhat a tough place to play to start with. And when you're traveling from the East with so many new personnel, top to bottom, when you're talking coaches, when you're talking players, I mean, Toronto, I think, like I mentioned before, I think they're going to struggle early. because they're going to take some time to develop continuity and the chemistry. So I like the Stamps, and I would say they cover whatever spread that they're given. And chances are it probably ends up under. I don't know what that over under is going to be put at, but probably ends up under, because I think you're correct with Toronto's defense being the strength of their team, at least at the start of the season.
Yeah, I mean, with all the guys there, like Enoch Muamba and Cordero Law, I go on and on. Hughes, I know Hughes is older now, but this guy can still play. He can still get after the quarterback. He's still got that motor to push the line of scrimmage backward. I think he's still got that in him, even after all these years. He's been obviously a dominant player on that side of the football. I think Calgary, they like their receivers. Everything I've read to, we talk about them losing Rogers and Brescison and so many receivers, but they like Hergy Mayala. They like Colton Hunchak, Josh Huff. They like their running back, Kadeem Carey, even though they lost Don Jackson to the Ticats. So they feel good about their skill position talent. And hey, if Dave Dickinson says I feel good about our skill position talent, I'm kind of likely to believe what he's saying in that regard. So that's why I think Calgary will be fine. We always say, right, Calgary falling off. And I've been guilty of that too, Chris. Like Calgary's fallen off. They're not going to be contending. They may struggle even to make the playoffs. And sure enough, they keep their head above water and they're still one of the better teams in the West. And I think there's still a chance they will be that once again this season. Final game of the week 1 card now, Ottawa Red Blacks against the Edmonton Elks. I'm going to be very careful. I make sure I always get that name right because sometimes it's taken time to adjust to the name change. Edmonton Elks. Or I was on a show earlier this week, Chris, and I said Eskimos ended up slipping out. And I'm like, oh, but I corrected myself right away. But that will happen every now and then. Kind of like, in the NFL, I've called the Las Vegas Raiders, the Oakland Raiders still every now and then, or the LA Chargers, the San Diego Chargers. It's going to happen, when you're used to a team being a certain name for so long. But Edmonton Elks, this is another one where I think it's going to be tough for the Dog to compete, given the situation. Matt Nichols might not even play in this game, for the Ottawa Red Blacks. Here's another guy that they brought him in to be the starting quarterback. He's limited in practice. He's not a certainty to suit up here, which means you're looking at Dominique Davis probably as the quarterback for Ottawa if Nichols can't play. And he was, there's a reason why they struggled 2 years ago when he was under center. He didn't have a good year, Dominique Davis. Didn't seem to really be ready for that starting job in the CFL. So if it's no Matt Nichols, that's going to be trouble here because you're going to have to put up points against this Edmonton team because I don't think Ottawa's defense with a team that gave up north of 30 points per game on average 2 years ago is going to have an easy time of it against Trevor Harris throwing the ball, who, by the way, is on that Tom Brady offseason training regimen that Brady's been using, and that's got Brady playing into his 40s and at a high level. And he's talking about how, he thinks he could play into his 40s and still play very well in the CFL, Harris. So he kind of adopted that kind of offseason training regimen that Brady uses. We'll see if it translates on the field. But he's got a great O-line, an outstanding offensive line, incredible skill position talent, and it could just overwhelm this Ottawa defense that, again, wasn't good 2 years ago, and they've got a lot of new faces in the secondary. We talk about that. There's a lot of these teams in their past defense. They're trying to get new faces integrated. So I think Edmonton could win this game decisively. The bet that I'll be looking at is the team total for Edmonton. And the reason I like team totals, Chris, is because you don't have to worry. Like if you like team total over for Edmonton, which I do in this game, you don't have to worry then about what Edmonton's defense does against Ottawa. You take that element out of it. All you got to do is just, hope for Edmonton to do their job on offense, put up the points, move the football against Ottawa, which I believe they will. And you can cash your bet even if the game's close, or dare I say it, even if Edmonton loses the game, you could still cash a team total over winner with Edmonton as long as they hit the team total, which I think is probably going to be, 28.5, 29.5, something like that in this game. And I think they could easily get into the 30s when it's all said and done. So I would lean Edmonton in the game and certainly the full game over. This could be your highest scoring football game of week 1, in my opinion. But I think the Elks team total over is, I think, maybe the best way to go in this game. Again, we don't have numbers out yet, so we'll wait on that. But that's what I'm looking at in this game. Chris, the finale for week 1, what do you think here, Ottawa, Edmonton?
I think Edmonton wins by a landslide. I'm not sure that they're going to be stopped all game long. Edmonton's offense is loaded. So, and quarterback at the helm that is extremely high percentage completion rate, and the weapons that they have, O-line that they have, I think that they're going to score a lot of points in this game, and it's going to come down to how their defense plays. But I don't think that Ottawa's going to be able to score enough points to keep up with what Edmonton's going to do offensively. So I like Edmonton. I like them by whatever spread that they're given. Um, I think the over is a pretty good bet as well, and that's just because I think that Edmonton's probably going to alone put up 35 plus, and um, Ottawa, chances are, I mean, with Lapo at the helm, he's a great play caller. They should be able to do at least a little something on offense. So they should put up a little points, but definitely not going to keep up with what Edmonton's going to do.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just going to be a really tall order. I mean, for a new coaching staff and a rebuilt defense, and now you got to go up against this Edmonton team where their strength is offense. It's just, if you're Ottawa, the last thing you wanted is to see the CFL schedule, Chris, get released, and there's Edmonton waiting for you on the road, in week one with that, what could be a juggernaut offense. Maybe the layoffs slows them down a bit. They haven't, again, just like everybody else, they haven't played in 2 years, but I think that's the only thing that might slow them down, because I don't know if the Ottawa Red Blacks are going to do that. We will get to our Grey Cup predictions to wrap up the show, and I'll give you a best bet as well for this week one slate. We don't have much to go on, so I'll just give, we don't have numbers. The best bet's going to be from a game we don't have lines posted yet, so I'll just say what I'm looking at for the best bet for week one. But we'll shout out everybody in the chat for joining us on this season premiere edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy on YouTube. Real Deal Prime, Bill McDonald, Turnsey, welcome in. He says, thanks for joining us, Chris, from Turnsey in the chat. Robert Sherry, Not Applicable, Elliot V. Great. This guy is a big Packers fan, Razor Sharp Picks. He's also on the Pub Sports Radio channel as a host and contributor. The Packers need another wide receiver desperately. Chris Getzlaf, would you be available? Says Razor Sharp Picks. You want to answer that?
Yeah, I'm not sure that I would have been available to the Packers when I was in my prime. So, now when I've been out of shape for 3 years, I think it's highly unlikely. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, the Packers are going to be a fascinating team to watch in the NFL this year. We know the Aaron Rodgers drama that's behind them. People are acting like this is one last shot at a Super Bowl for him, for Devontae Adams, who may not be back after this year. So watching Green Bay is going to be interesting. Great question there. Razor Sharp Picks on that. Ryan C. El Guapo, Bob Lee Swaga, Zach Wilson for MVP also is one of the names in our chat here. So obviously a New York Jets fan. You better be hoping Zach Wilson is an MVP caliber quarterback. There's still a lot of concerns I have for the New York Football Jets going into this season, but that's another story. We will get to our best bets in just a second, but as we always do at this time of the show, we will hold on one sec. We'll bring it up here. There we go. We will pause for these messages just for 60 seconds from both Manscaped and Southtown 101. All right, Southtown 101 in San Antonio, Texas. Make sure you stop in. Great food, drinks, live music, DJs, karaoke, great bar and pub atmosphere. And look, the happy hours, 3 p.m. to 2 a.m. That's an extensive happy hour, and that's the kind of bar I like, because I want those kind of hours there at a place like that. So Southtown 101. Make sure you stop in San Antonio. Manscaped, promo code Pub Sports. Get 20% off your purchase with Manscaped using the promo code Pub Sports. Lawnmower 4.0, new and improved. And you can get 20% off your purchase of that or any Manscaped product with the promo code Pub Sports. And MyBookie.ag, another great sponsor, promo code Pub Sports. Football season's here. CFL starts tonight. NFL preseason. Don't forget, Cowboys Steelers Hall of Fame game tonight. College football is just a few weeks away as well. So football is here. It's time to get yourself ready for it. Sign up for MyBookie.ag. Use the promo code Pub Sports. Bitcoin, accepted currency now for your deposit there as well. MyBookie.ag, promo code Pub Sports. All right, we'd like to thank a million times over Chris Getzlaf for joining us on this show. It's our special guest, the season premiere edition of the Ian Cameron Football Frenzy, talking CFL football. Best bet for me for week one. We, again, no line for this game yet, but whatever the team total is for the Edmonton Elks Saturday night against the Ottawa Red Blacks, I think they go over that number. I think it will be a very good offensive night for Trevor Harris and a loaded Edmonton offense against a rebuilt and Ottawa defense, which 2 years ago was north of 30 points per game allowed. It's just going to take a lot of time for that defense to improve. And this is not the kind of opponent you want to face in your first game with a defense that has a lot of work to do to try to improve. So I like Edmonton's team total over as my best bet for week one. Chris, best bet for week one if you got one. If you have one, what would it be?
Without knowing the actual numbers, I think Edmonton covering the spread is probably mine.
All right, Edmonton to get the job done, laying whatever points they are, whatever points they end up being favored by against Ottawa for Chris and his best bet. And Chris, before we get out of here, Grey Cup predictions. I'm going Hamilton, Edmonton. I've said it now on a bunch of different shows. I'm sticking with it. Hamilton Tiger Cats, Edmonton Elks, Grey Cup for me. And Edmonton, look, they lost in the East Final to the Ticats 2 years ago in the crossover. And that's why I'm stunned that their win total was 6. I think they're a 500. That means they're a 500 team, and they could still go over that win total. They're at least a 7-7 team. I think they're more like 8-6 this season, 9-5. They could even be 10-4 if things really go right for the Edmonton Elks. So it's Hamilton, Edmonton, and I'm going Homer. Hamilton Tiger Cats on their home field, Tim Hortons Field, December. I will be there. I can't wait. Sandy Beveridge, friend of mine as well, who's going to a bunch of Ticat games, still living in Hamilton as well. He's excited about the Ticats. He'll be a guest on the show in a couple weeks. We're excited. We think for Hamilton, it's an all-in season. And the thing too, Chris, about these teams that are hosting the Grey Cup and they're good going into the season, if they get injuries during the year, they're not sitting on their hands. They're going to look to go out and bring in some players via trade. This is an all-in Grey Cup or bust type of season for the Hamilton Tiger Cats. So Hamilton, Edmonton, Grey Cup, and I'll say the Ticats finally win their first Grey Cup since 1999. I sure as hell hope so, because we're the team with the longest drought now in the CFL after Winnipeg won last year. Chris, let us know what your Grey Cup prediction is for 2021.
Okay, well, I'm going Homer as well. I'll take Saskatchewan, and I think Hamilton's coming out of the East, no problem. So I think it's going to be Saskatchewan, Hamilton, and I'm going to stick with my Homer and take Saskatchewan in that game. So I think throughout the year, the O-line gels and the rest of the team is already solid as it gets. So I'm sticking with my boys.
There you go, Hamilton, Saskatchewan, but in the Grey Cup with Saskatchewan getting the job done. You know what? That would worry me if it's Saskatchewan, because I'll tell you what, even though we're hosting the Grey Cup, you would think the Ticat fans are just going to completely outnumber the opponent. Not when it's Saskatchewan, not if it's Saskatchewan. They're going to travel like you wouldn't believe, because that's what they do. And there's going to be a bunch of green in that crowd if the Riders were to play the Ticats in the Grey Cup in December here in Hamilton. So we wouldn't have that same home field advantage like we would if we played Edmonton or we played some other team from out west. So that would bother me a little bit. We'd get inundated with people from the great province of Saskatchewan if they end up facing us in the Grey Cup. Chris, absolutely awesome stuff. Great to have you on the show. Great analysis as well. The people in the chat enjoyed your presence on the first season premiere edition of the show. Hope to do this again at some point later this season. Absolutely. Chris, thanks for joining us today.
Yep. Thanks for having me. Great chatting.
Absolutely. And that'll wrap up this edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy. Thanks for watching. For our special guest, Chris Getzlaf, I'm Ian Cameron. Have a great week. Enjoy week 1 of the CFL, and we'll be back next Thursday, 1 o'clock p.m. Eastern, for another edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the games, and good luck.